I'd like to introduce to you a brilliant mastering engineer, all-around great guy, and incoming president-elect of the Audio Engineering Society, Mr. Jonathan Weiner.
Thank you so much. I'll only be here for a moment, but I want to take... How many of you feel as if you have not been welcomed enough for being at the AES convention? Great. Well, for you... Thank you so much for being here and taking part. It's been a fantastic and exciting year, and there's a lot of really wonderful stuff happening. If you're interested in getting involved in AES, either by becoming a member or volunteering around our planning and giving feedback about programming, go to aes.org and please join. Among my roles, one of the things that I have the pleasure of doing is being education director for Isotope, and we get to partner with interesting artists who are doing creative things in the world that push the boundaries of technology, and in doing so foster artistry and creativity. And so I have the great pleasure of having worked with and introducing for you someone who not only understands artistry and creativity, but is enormously creative herself. And I think that's all I need to say. The woman who needs no introduction, I introduce Sylvia Massy.
Thank you, Jonathan. All right. Well, I haven't really done like a presentation in front of people in headphones like this, but we'll give it a shot. The only thing that's a real drag here is that I can't wear my hat. All right. But I look less like a birthday cake now. Anyway, my name is Sylvia Massy. I've been producing and engineering for over 30 years and started basically in San Francisco doing broadcast production. But today we're going to talk about something about your recordings and how when you're recording, you're looking for the secret ingredient. What is the secret ingredient? And that's what I want to talk about today. And let's see if I can forward this thing. Come on. It's very slow computer today, but we'll make it work. So what is the secret ingredient? Well, I've explored this quite a bit. I'm known for my production work, including doing dangerous things to musical instruments and running audio through cheese. This is a block of Gouda, by the way. I also record unconventional percussion in other instruments. Sorry about that. Some people call me a bulldozer because I push my way through to get the job done. It's part of being a producer, right? But is that part of the secret ingredient? Well, we're going to explore that. First of all, I mentioned that I started in broadcast. And I was an on-air personality for a while in my college days. And I learned how to use the equipment while I was a radio celebrity, or not really a celebrity, but I was there. And I did radio shows. And I loved the studio where you could do radio production. And I would make commercials. And I got a job doing radio production in Oakland, California, and did that for a while. And finally got, after I realized that radio is not music. The music is really done in music studios. Radio is about commercials. So I moved over to recording in music studios. And some of the first jobs that I had in San Francisco were with young up-and-coming artists at that time. This photograph is from a studio called CD Presents in San Francisco, and it's a band called the Sea Hags. And the co-producer, is Kirk Hammett, who went on to work with, obviously with Metallica, and he's the guitar player for Metallica, the lead guitar player. Anyway, he's very young in this photo, and so am I. I'm there wearing the DOA shirt. We loved punk rock. I did a lot of punk rock back then. And then eventually I moved to Los Angeles and connected up with a bunch of projects, including Danzig and work with Rick Rubin. And Rick Rubin brought me in onto sessions with some great people, including Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And these are collections of my Polaroids from the sessions. And then I got to work with this guy, Johnny Cash. And Johnny was a sweet fellow. I learned so much from working on these projects. This photo here, I especially like. This is in the studio. This was in Sound City, in the main room in Sound City, in Studio A. And you can see in this photo, you can see Rick Rubin here. Come on, computer. There you go. And you can see Tom sitting there next to Johnny. It was Johnny Cash. It was the Johnny Cash Unchained record, but Johnny had Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers as his backup band. So it was a star-studded celebration in the studio. And you can see Johnny here sitting. Also in the back is Marty Stewart, who's a great country star, and Mike Campbell, who's part of the Heartbreakers, Benmont Tench, and, all right, there's me. Okay. That just proves that I was actually there. I was way back in the back corner. Of course, I was an engineer at that point, but I got to be a part of these great records. So I got to see how Rick Rubin uses the secrets that he knows in the studio, what those are, and I've come to know more about what the secret ingredient is. So I want to ask you what you think that is. Is it the equipment? Is it microphones? Can you pull out a microphone and that's the secret to making a great recording? Not necessarily. Microphones are great. I love microphones. But the question about is bigger better? Well, no, it's not necessarily how big your mic is. It's how you use it. So, for instance, in this photo here, you can see that too many mics on one. This doesn't make the recording better. So many mics like this, you're going to have phase problems. So microphones are not necessarily the secret to a great recording. You can have one good mic, point it in the right direction. It's important to choose the right mic. When I was first starting out in LA, I used to go to some rock clubs. There was a club called Raji's, and there was a band there called Tool, and they were young, and we all kind of supported each other. There's here's me in the back of the room with the Tool on stage, and right in front of me is Tom Morello. So you would see these people who became famous later in these little clubs in LA. So it was an exciting time. But I got to see how Maynard was using the microphone. So when I had an opportunity to record Maynard in the studio, well, the way I was originally taught to record vocals was to have a suspended mic hanging on a stand, right? And a large diaphragm condenser or tube mic hanging on a stand with a pop filter, and then the singer would come up, but not too close, and then, you'd get a performance out of them. Well, unfortunately for recording Maynard doesn't sing like that. On stage, he's doing this. He's going, raw, and he's leaning way down, and he's actually shouting at the floor, holding a mic in his hand, like a live mic, like a 58. So, and then I realized that over time that perhaps this is what happens to the de-evolution of vocals, is that things are not like they used to be. It's not a proper position when you sing anymore. It's like whatever goes. You can see in this is one of my drawings, and that the singers over time have kind of changed the way that they sing. Tony Bennett is the first person there, and then Robert Plant, Axl Rose, Jonathan Davis from Korn, and finally Henry Rollins. And he's shouting into the floor, and this is exactly what Maynard would do. So when I'm in the studio, I had to solve this problem. How do I get the best performance out of Maynard with whatever mic it took? I had to make some decisions. Ultimately, we used this microphone, which is not a typical vocal mic. It's a C1000 AKG mic. We wrapped it in foam so that it would have less noise. But he could grab it and shout into the floor, toss it around, and we did great recordings with this. So, and as it turns out, so many other great singers, rock singers in particular, have used handheld mics or very simple and inexpensive mics to do their great vocals. Like when Bowie came into a studio I was working at, he asked for an SM57 to do his vocals. And the studio only had high-end mics like Neumann U47s and, you know, these fancy mics. They had no SM57s, which is a simple Shure mic that's $100. I had one, however, and I says, well, here, please use mine. And so this is my Bowie mic. It has Bowie DNA on it. But Bowie would actually stand in the control room with the monitors blasting and sing in front of the console, just shouting at the speakers. The same with Bono. The same with Bruce Springsteen. You know, don't be afraid. You don't have to be afraid of feedback. Honestly, if you have one of these mics and a Shure SM58 and you're standing in front of your speakers, as long as you're not pointing it at the speakers, there's a very narrow pattern, and you're not going to get a lot of bleed. So you can get better performances using the right mic, the right, which could be considered the wrong mic, just because your performer can really feel like they're on stage in front of an audience and feel totally comfortable. They don't even have to wear headphones when you've got monitors playing, they're holding the mic, and they're singing to the music coming out of the speakers. So that was a big revelation. So now I'm never afraid to have a singer stand in front of in front of speakers and sing. Also, I'm not afraid to use inexpensive mics for vocals. I really love the Shure mics for vocals. Also, there's a few other things about microphones that we should talk about. I'd like to share with you. The way that I like to get great drum sounds, it's actually very simple. You can have a bunch of dynamic microphones and have several of them on a drum kit. My secret for the drum recording is that all those mics are pointed in the same direction. And I've made this diagram to show you that if you point all the mics in the same direction, you minimize phase cancellation. And that's a very, very simple thing to do just to start. If you're looking to start a drum recording, just think of that. Don't have mics pointing at each other. Let's say you've got a snare here and you've got a tom here. Well, you're going to get the tom mic here and the snare mic here. They're basically pointing at each other and they're going to cancel each other out. You're going to have a thin floor tom, and your snare is going to sound like paper. If you just change that to have them point towards the drummer equal as possible in the same direction, you minimize those cancellations. And you could get more detailed with that, but typically I don't like to spend a lot of time having the drummer go bap, 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 bap. I want to start, I want to get going. It's about momentum. So this is how I start. I'll detail it a little bit, but this is how I generally start. I am an expert at miking. I mic many things. I love microphones. I know how to mic a chicken. By the way, the spelling of mic, when you're talking about miking a chicken, when you were talking about how to mic a chicken, this doesn't look like the right spelling for mic. But in fact, it is. My publisher has told me that this is how you spell mic in this context. If we're talking about miking, then it would be M-I-C-I-N-G. why? I don't understand. But anyway, I am an expert at miking a chicken. You think that I'm fooling, but in fact, I'm not fooling. And I have mic'd several chickens. I used to have chickens. And this is Gertrude. She did a solo on a record for Anti-Product. And we're using a very high-end tube Mojave MA100 microphone for that. Thank you, Gertrude. Now, I like to build microphones, too. This is something fun that you can do in the studio. And I'm kind of jumping around here, but I hope you'll bear with me. I like to build mics, and this is a simple mic that you can build that will really enhance the sound of a live kick drum. Now, when I mic a drum kit, I have a close mic, and you can see in this photo that there's a mic inside that kick drum. That's my close mic. But I also include this NS10 speaker on the outside, and they're very simple to build. You just find, this one is a 10-inch speaker, but whatever kind of speaker that you can find, that you reverse wire it and solder an XLR onto it. Now, or an instrument cable. Now the instrument cable goes into a DI box, and you take that signal and record it on a separate track than your close mic. What you're going to get out of that 10-inch speaker is a lot of sub-frequencies. They're easy to build. They're a little tricky to suspend in front of the kick drum, but wow, the results are fantastic, and it will really enhance your kick drum to add some of that sub in there. And it's not artificial; it's the real thing. You're just capturing the low end of that kick drum using a big microphone that you've built yourself. You can also have fun building mics out of telephones, and this is one of my favorite things to do. You go to a thrift store, you buy one of these old dial-up telephones with a handset that you can unscrew the mouthpiece. And you unscrew the mouthpiece, and inside the mouthpiece is a little carbon button, and it sits in a cradle. You just disconnect all the original wiring from that cradle and attach an XLR, a sacrificed XLR. I call it sacrificed because I've cut it in half, and I'm attaching it to the cradle. And then I tuck everything back, and you can see from this photo that there's an XLR wired in there. Now right away you'll get audio from it. You're going to have to crank up the mic pre to get it a good strong signal. But if you enhance that with a 1.5 volt battery across one of the legs of that XLR, then you bring it up to line level. So I'll just solder it right in there, and then I tuck it into the handset, and now I have a line level microphone that's actually super useful. Instead of having to try to use filtering later in your mix, you have a microphone that allows your performer to hear what it's going to sound like in the end, because they're in their headphones. If they're using headphones and they're talking into this mic, they have that telephone sound, and it will change their performance. So this is a way that I try to get a better performance out of the artist, and it really works. There's other things to consider when you're recording in the quest to find what is the secret ingredient. Well, front end is super important. It's almost, for me, it's the most important thing in the recording chain. More so than an expensive mic. I would prefer to spend money on the mic preamplifiers. I am so spoiled to have this console. It's a custom Neve console from 1972 with 1073 modules. And if you know anything about 1073 modules, they're the most copied, I think, type of mic preamplifier that you can find out there. And this is here's a close-up of what those look like in their raw form. A lot of these old consoles have kind of been taken apart, and you can purchase these individual channels, and each one has a single mic pre and equalizer on it. And what happens when I plug any mic into this circuit is it instantly sounds good. It's kind of my secret weapon. But today, these are very expensive and hard to find. I get a very similar result with other types of mic preamplifiers. Mr. Daking is on the floor here, and he makes a Neve type mic pre that I think is excellent. Also, Black Lion Lot Audio. I'm not sure if they're even at the show this year. They probably are, right? They are. Anyway, this is a great product, and they're relatively inexpensive. It's a very good value. They sell units, individual units in a 500 series form, or you can get a rack unit with a pair or 4. And then also the new generation of plugins now. Andrew Sheps has his 1073 emulation, which I love. Also, UA makes a great one too, UAD. But these are similar, and I've put them side by side, and you get similar results. So you can use mics and filter the sounds with these emulations and get some similar results. There's nothing like the real thing, though. But if you don't have the real thing, well, you can get one of these Slate mics. Now, this is a VMS 1, right? Virtual Mic System 1. And it comes with an analog mic. It's an actual acoustic mic with a mic pre, a matched mic pre. And it's calibrated in such a way that when you use the software that comes with the microphone, you get a very accurate representation of one of these really expensive mics. So if you use Slate VMS 1 and then one of these U47 type of emulations along with the Sheps 1073, well, you're going to get something very close to the real thing. So it's exciting. It's exciting times because of this new type of equipment that you can get. So the other thing that I really think is important when you're recording and capturing the music or the sound is the space that you record in. And I love using this as important as the type of equipment that you use. I think the space is extremely important in capturing the performance that you're going for. I used to have this building here. It's a theater in Northern California, and it's the old theater. It was a vaudevillian theater, and it still had the seats in it, but all I did was pull the seats out of the back of it and put my console in there. No separation between the console and the recording space. I would have bands set up on stage, and they would perform there, and I would record them, and I'd wear headphones while I was in the room. It was a great way. We had the studio for 15 years. Now I've moved just up the road. I bought a church, and I am in Ashland, Oregon. And the church is also good, and this is the scene that it is right now. It's called church. It's called Studio Divine, and it's in an old church. And there's my old Neve. But there's other advantages to working in these open spaces and old churches. For one thing, if you're looking for a studio space, it's much easier than it ever has been to find a church to work in, because these are properties that the congregation dies off, and it's kind of an odd building. It's not an easily sold building, so you can usually negotiate low prices for these buildings, and they're already acoustically treated. They're wonderful spaces. And not only that, but you get the added advantage of sometimes getting some instruments included in the deal. These instruments are incredible. These pipe organs that are found in some of the churches, and churches that are active still have these. If they're operational and they kept them tuned, there's usually an organist who would love to play your music. If you want to add some dramatic organ with a booming room onto your recordings, then bring in a laptop and an interface and set up some mics and record these things. They're absolutely astounding, and it's so exciting. And you drag a band in there and they get really excited. So I started doing that and got very excited about remote recording. So now I have a recorder, and I didn't bring a picture of it, but it's a Sound Devices Mix Pre 10. And Sound Devices is here on the floor today. It's just the simplest little, well, it seems simple, but it's about that big. It's battery operated. You can put a strap on it and put it around your shoulder and hide it under your coat and do like secret recording, you know. I've gone into art museums and I've recorded punk rock in art museums. You know, like flash, go in there and start making noise. You know, I haven't been kicked out yet, but I you know, they didn't know what they were getting into when they let me in there with my mix rig. They didn't know it was there because it was under my coat. We did, punk rock vocals in a European Masters art museum. I also love the idea of going to remote places and recording outdoors. Like this is on a cliff in Norway, but more recently there is a plan to go to the Antarctic, where the touring company will they will dig a cave, an ice cave, so that we can record in. So we'll just stay tuned for that. We'll see if that'll work. But just like you get this Mix Pre 10, you can go anywhere, and you will get a completely different performance from your artist if you have them singing in a church than if you have them singing in a studio behind a glass. There's just, imagine the difference of a vocalist singing in a studio with headphones, and they're, you know, standing in a cramped small space with Auralex, and then take that performance, okay, and now put that same singer in a church, grand space, echoing, and you will get a completely different performance. So I love the use of space. And I've done cave recording too. Cave recording can be really exciting because of the reverb that is natural reverb. So there's also been, oh yes, this one was really exciting. This was in a nuclear power plant. This was a nuclear power plant that actually was never put online, but they built the towers. These are massively humongous structures, a huge concrete tower, and we set up the session in the bottom of this thing. That was tower number 5, and the band was Thunderpussy. It was an all-girl noise rock band, perfect for this kind of thing. And we recorded with remote recording equipment in this nuclear power plant. No one got radiation. Luckily, it had never gone online, so we were safe. So I invite you to try some remote recording, especially if you can, as you're recording seriously, you get all your main tracks done, and you give this to your artist as a gift. I always will say, listen, if we can get all these guitars done, then we can go to this crazy place and we'll do this special thing. We'll throw a guitar off a cliff, or we'll, you know, and they get really excited, and suddenly it kind of lubricates the whole session to move much quicker. I also think that there is techniques that we all use that are special and we should talk about that. Is it the secret ingredient? I don't know. But certain ways of miking and splitting guitars get really good results. This was the setup for System of a Down. And the guitars there was used an Iceman, and I'm just going to go through a few things quickly to kind of share with you some of the things that I've done in the studio that have worked really well. So for System of a Down, it was the Iceman guitar by Ibanez, and into a splitter box. And the splitter box then goes to 2 guitar heads with separate cabs. Those cabs are mic'd up, and then all those mics go through through buses, basically up on a desk, and then bus together to one track. So now when I'm recording that guitar, I'll double it, and I'll triple it, and I'll quadruple it. Instead of recording a guitar in stereo, which will still be very narrow, I want to just double it. So it's huge. It's incredibly wide. And so we double this. And the reason why it's good to have two different amps is I usually have one really compressed, really gainy, and the other one more clear and dynamic. So in this case, the Mesa was dual rectifier, and that's a very kind of a gainy compressed sound. And alongside it, I had a Marshall 100-watt lead, which is dynamic and you can really hear some of the clarity in the notes in a chord. So depending on the part that Darren was playing, I would blend the mix of these two amps, blend them, and then bus them together into one track. So anyway, that's how I've been doing it. And there's some other things in this chain that you'll see. There's something called an Army Man compressor, and that was just an old compressor that I found in some old radio guy's garage, and it was an old Western Electric, and I just put the guitar through that, and it just gave it this furry kind of crazy sound, and we recorded it on tape. So that's some details about that. I also like to use, when recording, just random items in drums. It's fun to open up a drum kit and just throw some different items in there, and you get, you know, how the snares on the bottom of the wires on the bottom of a snare drum have a certain kind of resonance and sparkle. Depending on what you put into the snare drum, it will also add a bounce and an interesting color that you wouldn't normally get. You can also have fun with different items that you would not typically use for percussion. Like this is Frozen Trout, and they sound a lot like claves, but they have their own kind of thing. You have to work quickly though, because they melt. Then also, here's the surface transducer. This is a fun thing just to have around the studio, because if you take one of these, basically what a surface transducer is, what my understanding is that it's the magnet in the coil from a speaker without the cone. So it'll generate sound if you attach it to something. So if you attach this to a wall, it vibrates the wall, and the wall generates sound like a speaker would. So I use that when I'm recording by running audio back into, let's say, a guitar. This is kind of it's kind of a sloppy way of attaching it to a guitar, but the artist didn't care. He loved it. And here's a diagram of how that worked. So the guitar, and you'll see in the headstock that the surface transducer is attached in the headstock. The guitar is playing through an amp. That amp is mic'd. It's running through a mic pre and through the DAW, and then back out the DAW through a volume pedal to control it, and then through a little amplifier, and then back onto to vibrate the body of the guitar. And when you do that, your guitar player can control this incredible feedback sustain that sounds like nothing else. That it's actually the surface transducer is vibrating the body of the guitar, and it's a very unique and wonderful sound. Now, I've really taken this experimentation to an extreme, and one day I was sitting at dinner with some friends, and we talked about how potatoes can be, potatoes can conduct circuit, audio, right? Or could they? We kind of were talking about how potatoes, you can run a clock. There's something called a potato clock. And I was thinking, well, if it acts as a battery, then it probably, you can transfer audio through it. So we made this, I made this little diagram, and we thought, well, let's try it. And we did. And there was a positive potato and a negative potato. And we ran the speaker out of a Marshall into the potato filter and then into a speaker. And it worked for a minute, and then it blew the amp up. So don't do that. However, if you use a solid state amp, it doesn't bother it. So you can do all kinds of wonderful filtering experiments using whatever. I started with vegetables and went on to sausage. But then when I started working with cheese sausage, I thought, sausage, regular sausage is kind of flat. Potatoes have a nice high shelf, but the sausage is flat. Now, when I tried a cheese sausage, freaking the tone was so fantastic, and I was like, what's the difference between a regular sausage? I'm sorry, this is like really crazy to talk about. It's fucking weird with headphones. I'm sorry, but bear with me. Okay, so cheese sausage. So what is it about the cheese sausage? What's the difference between cheese sausage and regular sausage? Well, it's the cheese. So I just went straight for cheese. I find that Gouda is the best. If you run your signal out of your solid state amplifier through Gouda on the way to the speaker, you will get the amazing blues tone. And that's for real. Is that the secret ingredient? Actually, that's pretty much that's a secret recipe right there. Now, I've tried several things since then, because this really opened up my eyes to what could be done with filtering. And the most exciting filtering that I've done in this kind of type of filtering has been running the audio from the speaker output of a solid state amp through light bulbs. Different light bulbs have different sounds on the way to the speaker. And the light bulb lights up, too. So depending on the filament, if it's an incandescent, it has a certain sound, the material on the filament. Fluorescents are my favorite because they're like the best fuzz pedal that you've ever heard. And then LEDs have a completely different sound, too. So there is a lot of voltage involved, so be careful if you're going to try these tricks. Do it safely. And then that makes sure your whole chain is connected before you plug it into the wall, before you plug your amp into the wall. And then the other thing, which a dear friend, Ed Cherney, told me to do, which was the thing that kind of started it all, is he suggested that I take the output of the speaker jack on the output of the solid state amp and put in line a drill, like a power drill, a wired power drill. And what happens then is the power drill is getting power from the output of the amplifier. And when you hit certain notes, say on a guitar, the drill starts up, and then you get the sound of the audio going through the electronics of the drill, as well as the harmonics of the motor running. It's crazy sound, fantastic. So there's a whole world of new sounds out there that I'm excited to explore. Is that the secret ingredient? After all this time, I've come to realize that we're here at AES, and it's about gear, and it's about new exciting technology, which is great. But truly, what is the secret ingredient? I honestly think that it is your participation in allowing the musician to be creative. What I do when I choose a microphone or a mic pre or a place that we're going to record is I'm trying to enhance their experience to give us the best performance, the one that is truly from their heart, that they're disconnected from the technology entirely, and they're just giving us this pure emotion from the original song. It's about the song. That's where I think the secret ingredient is. It's about the song and the performance. And I hope that you'll be able to help musicians to find that. And that's what I think is the secret ingredient. I'd love to do some question and answer if we have time. And thank you for listening to my interesting PowerPoint presentation. Oh, yes, and one more thing. Buy my book. This is the Recording Unhinged book. There's a new one coming out. I am just talking with my publisher on Son of Unhinged. And soon, within the next year, you will see the great vintage microphone book, which is going to be like no other vintage microphone book. It will be an encyclopedia of all the history of microphone making and all the models that make a difference. So be looking out for that too. All right, let's take some questions.
We have time for a couple of questions, but
Okay.
one piece of housekeeping before we all leave. When you depart, please just take your headsets off and leave them on the chair so that we don't have to collect them at the front. And who's got our first question? Is it Leslie? Why, yes, it is.
Thanks, Glenn. Hi, Sylvia.
Hi, Leslie.
I have a question about dreaming sounds. So, if you have you ever had the experience of having a sound in your head and then trying to capture it? And have you ever done that?
Oh man, that sounds fantastic. I have had melodies stuck in my head, like I'm songwriting while I'm sleeping, and then I wake up and I immediately grab my phone and I put that down. There has been a few times when I've heard something and then tried to remember it later. That is a very difficult thing to do. Does that happen to you?
Yes, it did happen to me once, and I actually, not to brag, but I dreamt of something in reverse. So when I went to record it, I had to record it front ways so that when I played it backwards, it would sound like what I heard in my head.
Did it work?
It worked. Yeah, it was really cool.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Thanks.
Cool. Oh, hang on. One over here first.
So, hey, how's it going?
Hi.
So you mentioned you take all the, mics and amps, or, you have all these channels,
Yep.
bust them all into one.
Yeah.
How do you just commit to a guitar tone? Because I have such a hard time just being like, this is going to be the guitar tone.
Do it.
Just do it.
Just do it. And then
Nice.
double it and triple it. You
Yeah.
know? And, that's the most difficult thing for me being a mixer now is people don't commit. And
Yeah.
then they can't make a decision, so they leave it up to me, the mixer, and then it's just so difficult, and I'll have to make a blend. The other thing is that oftentimes the phasing between several mics on a cab will be difficult. Somehow, when you bus everything together, it'll sound stronger and better if you just commit and just try it. Pretty soon, you won't be scared.
Gotcha. Thank
All
you.
right.
Yeah, did you ever get 5 kick drum mics and have to mix 5 kick drum mics?
That sounds awful.
Hello.
Hi.
One of the things I noticed when you were showing off your avant-garde sound experimentations, which I think is perfectly wonderful, is how did the avant-garde music movement influence this? And two, with the drums and the items that you placed inside of it, is very much like John Cage's prepared piano.
I have done prepared piano.
Yeah.
Yes. And then Karl-Heinz Stockhausen is also a huge inspiration in that, and especially the helicopter recordings that he did, where he had a different string player above the ground in 4 separate helicopters, and it was a string quartet that was. I think they call it the helicopter quartet. Anyway, these kind of ideas are so inspirational. Prepared piano, if you don't know what prepared piano is, it's basically taking any piano, really, and then putting things within the strings. You could put pieces of paper, you could put silverware, you could put pencils, or anything. The trick is that you're doing something that you can take away later without damaging the instrument. That's what prepared piano is. And you get different effects depending on which key you hit, and you may have several things in your piano. Certain studios don't like that, but it's a really adventurous way of recording. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
Hi. So I was just curious, are there any times when you had a really cool creative recording idea, but the artist didn't want to do it?
Oh, several times, and that's fine. It's their record. My job is just to throw out ideas. If I can be of help, I'm trying to inspire them to come up with an idea. So if I throw out something and they come back with something better, especially, or something different, it doesn't matter. Let's do that, And in more times than not, that it does help to enhance their creative experience, So yeah, you can't be precious. It's not your music. If you're the engineer or producer, you have to step back and just say, well, this is not my thing. Let them, help them. Yeah.
We just have another minute with Sylvia. Do we have
Oh.
time for one last
Darn, it went
question?
so fast.
All right, here we go.
Hi.
Have you used convolution to modify the sounds?
Now, I haven't modified convolution. I've used previously recorded convolution, but this is something else that I'm really interested in. As well, I'm very interested in object mixing, which is multi-channel mixing for surround or for immersive, which has you take instruments or sounds and you place them in a 360-degree field. Dolby has the Atmos system, which is object-based. So there's things with software that I haven't entirely explored to the limit yet, but that's a good point. The convolution is really great. Have you done some?
Yes, you take a cymbal and you play a guitar through it. It's very fascinating.
A cymbal and you play a guitar through it.
You take an impulse of a cymbal or something dropped on a cymbal,
Yes.
and then you play the guitar through it.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, that's a whole new thing. Oh, boy. I know what I'm going to be doing next week. Thanks for that. All right.
Cool. Did you ever think of going to all of your engineer friends and saying, "What do you do? What's the wackiest thing you've ever done?"
I do, and that's what that's where this Recording Unhinged book came from. There's 35 different engineers who contributed to that volume. The next one, hopefully, Glenn, you'll contribute to with your wackiest, funnest, most creative story.
Yeah, there have been a few. A couple of
Yeah.
them involved guns, but
Really?
yeah, oh yeah.
Oh,
The
I've done
ultimate
that
snare
too.
drum sound. Really?
Really? Have you shot it?
Yeah.
Shot?
Oh yeah.
Oh. No.
Yeah. You have to be outside. but-
Okay, you have to. That will be in the book then. I have shot a piano. Yeah. That was good.
We did a piano with what do they call the giant slingshot?
You did that? The
Yeah.
catapult?
Well, we did it on TV. Yeah.
You did?
Yeah, for Northern Exposure.
Did you record? That was you?
Yeah, that was they
That was a
flung the
huge-
thing
that was-
a couple
did you
hundred
record
yards.
it?
Yeah,
Holy
and made an amazing
cow.
sound. But I forget the
Dude,
device, but
You're holding out.
Yes.
You're not letting us know the secret side of Glenn.
you're the star here, not me. Anyway, Sylvia, thank you so much for
Thank
spending your
you.
time with us,
Thank
ladies
you
and gentlemen.
very, very much.
Sylvia Massy.
Thanks very, very much.